Good evening and welcome. Really, this is our third presentation in the speaker series, Digital Disruptions, a collaboration between Scheller College of Business at Georgia Tech and Accenture Digital. And today's topic is going to be on creating customer experiences in the digital era. My name is Maryam Alavi, Dean of Scheller College of Business, and it's wonderful to welcome you and have you here tonight. So tonight we have a panel of experts that are going to explore ways that digital innovation in strategy, in customer experience design, e-commerce, and analytics are going to transform the customer journey. I would now very briefly highlight and introduce our panelists. And as I introduce each of the panelists, I'm going to ask them to come and join me in the stage and take their seats. And I'm going to ask you to please hold your applause until I have introduced everyone. So in alphabetical order, first we have Tony Drummond. Tony, please join us on the stage. Tony's bio introduces him as a customer-obsessed storyteller and inspirational leader. He is now serving as Vice President of Client Experience at Cox Automotive, and prior to joining Cox, he was an associate partner in IBM Consulting Services, where he drove customer-centered business transformations for a variety of different companies. Our next panelist is Janine Falcone. She is Senior Marketing Leader with Accenture Interactive, and she has led and greatly expanded Accenture Interactive's marketing offerings in North America over the last 3 years. And in her role, she oversees about 1,000 marketing professionals across marketing consulting, digital marketing, personalization, and experience optimization. Next is my colleague, Frank Rothermel. Frank is McDonough Chair in Business and Professor of Strategy and Innovation at Scheller College. He is also an Alfred P. Sloan Industry Studies Fellow. His teaching and research focuses on intersection of strategy, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And he has literally written the book on strategic management. His textbook is in its 4th edition, and it has been translated into Greek, Korean, and Chinese. So let's now give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to our panelists. Thank you all for being here, taking the time from your very busy schedules. And Janine actually flew here from Philadelphia, so thank you for being here. And I'll start by asking Tony, when I went to the company website in preparing for this facilitation of this panel, I noticed that it says that Cox Automotive, and I'm quoting, is positioned to transform the way the world buys, owns, and sells cars. So give us a little bit about what you do, how you do it, and a little context.
Sure. So there is an update, which is just recent in the past several weeks, is that we are in the business of transforming the way the world buys, sells, owns, and uses cars.
Okay.
And that is a reflection, I think, of the essential need, which is transportation, which has been fulfilled through traditionally car ownership. We're seeing that, with autonomous vehicles coming on the scene, you can't read a newspaper without running into an article about that. But we believe that by about 2023, that technology will be commercially viable. And from that point for the next decade, we will see a shift in miles driven from owned to used, whether it's ride sharing or subscription-based services or what have you, whatever comes next. So we're seeing that shift already, and we're aligning ourselves to be an end-to-end ecosystem to support constituents from the manufacturers to the dealers as their world is changing, all the way to the consumers as they are looking to use vehicles differently.
Exciting. Janine, in your role, you work with many companies to transform and get into the digital era and digital age. Give us a sense of how you work with your clients at Accenture Interactive.
Yes, so I've been with Accenture Interactive about 4 years, and my background in marketing is what brought me there. And what we do, Accenture Interactive is part of Accenture Digital, and it's the arm that looks across the entire experience. If you've heard anything about Accenture Interactive in the market today, it's a little different than what Accenture had been known for in the past. And the reason I point that out is because we like to think of ourselves as an experience agency on behalf of customers. And what that means is we look at everything from helping our clients, which are in some cases clients like Cox Automotive. We work in just about every industry there is across, in the telco space, the automotive space, retail, industrial, consumer brands, you name it, we're in those industries. But we start by looking at designing what that experience could look like, kind of across touch points, that anytime a customer, whether it's a business, a B2B customer, or a consumer, interacts with a brand, how does that happen? So we start by having a way to map that out. And then underneath that, think about all the things that need to happen to make that real. So we're also very strong in kind of consulting with organizations around kind of how to transform potentially their business to be able to serve that customer experience. We're also very well known for and strong in the area of technology in terms of what kind of technology do you need in the marketing space in particular that you have to make sure you use in the right way. We also understand how to operate and kind of scale up those services. And then the piece that I've had to build in the last 3 to 4 years, which we now have as well, is the ability to actually look at how you do actual marketing around those touch points. And what marketing means has very much transformed in the last, it's always transforming, but now it is much more than it used to be in terms of it's not just putting your message out there, and the brand ultimately sometimes is the experience. So pulling all of those things together requires a lot of different skill sets, both on our side to be able to serve our clients, and it's also how we advise our clients in all of these industries that I said on what they need to do to be able to handle that.
No wonder you need about 1,000 marketing professionals to work with you. Frank, your research at the intersection of strategy, innovation, and entrepreneurship, given all the changes as a result of technology and digitization in various industries, how do you think we need to change our approach to strategy? How is strategy changing in this new environment?
Great question, Dina Lavi. Thank you for having me tonight, and thank you all for coming. So strategy is about gaining and sustaining competitive advantage, achieving superior performance relative to other competitors in the industry. So right now you can ask yourself, how come Facebook and Alphabet's Google are capturing all the growth in online advertisement and marketing as they're having a competitive advantage, or the incredible growth of Netflix. So and competitive advantage is achieved basically as managers, as Tony and Janine mentioned, as leaders. You have 2 levers, value creation, customer experience, quality, and cost. And cost is based on the activities you undertake to provide this value. And that delta is then determined whether you will be able to achieve superior performance. An important point I want to make at the beginning of this panel is that, yes, digital disruption is important. The 5 most valuable companies on the planet right now, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and Alphabet, are all platform businesses that disrupt industries, digital transformation. We could go on, Netflix, Uber, Airbnb, WeChat, and so forth, Baidu. However, digital always has to be an end. It has to be a means towards an end. It cannot be an end by itself. So you have to still ask yourself, what's your strategy and how is digital going to help you achieve that, rather than what's your digital strategy per se. Strategy is about positioning between value and cost. And the second point I want to make, and then I'd like to listen more to the other panelists, which is we see a lot of innovation happening, what we call in our field, more in the business model side. How firms make money, two-sided platforms, for example. You still can have a strategy as a differentiator providing superior experience. If you think about Lyft and Uber, which markets did they disrupt? The markets that were most terrible in customer service, taxi rides, for example, in New York City in particular. The taxi driver, they do you a favor, they don't know where to go, they're rude. And now this all has changed, right? And so they're taking these inefficiencies out of the market, similar to Cox Automotive on the back B2B side, or the work Janine is doing. So long story short, strategy about value versus cost. Digital cannot be an end, but it has to be a means, and we also got to think more about business models, how are we going to use digital to drive business models.
Great. So my second question, let me again start with Tony. I was looking at a recent study of various corporations across this industry survey, and about 68% of participating companies were saying that one of the biggest challenges in this space of customer experience is just the sheer number of customer queries that they get and they have to address and respond to. Do you agree with that? Is this the same kind of issue at Cox Automotive? And what might be other challenges?
Yeah, I do, except that I see those as opportunities. Mm-hmm. There's a saying I read recently, maybe just this morning, that even the best laid plans don't go as planned. And so when you're setting up a business, you're setting up the business to create value for customers. The purpose is hyper clear. But all too often in that entrepreneurial launching moment, you don't consider what's downstream. And if you anticipate that there will be customers where they will have challenges, issues, questions, and you appropriately set up touch points for them to reach out to you and for your people to be prepared or your systems to be prepared to resolve that, you build brand equity in doing so. So it's an absolute opportunity. Now, the sheer volume of interactions that are coming in now, that is a challenge, and I think that by leveraging digital technologies, by making it easier for your people to be prepared to answer questions by presenting them with the next best thing to say, or by deflecting that interaction in the process of the system by anticipating what the client's need is and solving it before it has to get to a person. So there's a way to reduce the volume, but I think essentially you have to look at it, whether it's system resolved or whether it's people resolution, as opportunity.
That's great. One point that you brought up that kind of really resonated with me is this idea that when you want to come up with a tech-based innovation or startup, a lot of people, entrepreneurs, do not necessarily anticipate some of the customer issues, and they kind of think that the customer is always going to perceive and see and use that product or service exactly as they are conceiving it and developing it. And so this idea of really looking down the value chain and anticipating some of the issues that the customers and users that are not necessarily very tech savvy might have regarding that invention or startup is a key point that, in my experience, a lot of entrepreneurs miss on. They don't think about that ahead of time. So, Janine, let me just pretty much ask you the same question, except that I want you to please sort of try to generalize, thinking back about the variety of industries and companies that you have worked with. What seems to be some challenges in this space, or as Tony refers to them, as opportunities in this space?
Well, it all goes back to, again, serving that customer as the market has changed so much over the years. There's a lot of things happening at once. So there's sort of all the advancements in technology that both consumers can use and businesses have access to is causing chaos, right? Because consumers are used to, I can do this now, I can do this quickly because of this technology. And businesses, some of them in financial services, for example, they have massive infrastructure and data and things that they've had forever that have evolved in silos. So the businesses couldn't keep up necessarily with consumers. and the way consumers wanted to interact with demand. So they would expect, I'm going to get an immediate answer for this because I have a question right now. And at the same time, potentially they were trying to take cost out, maybe, in the way they were servicing customers, and that there's a conflict there. There's an inherent conflict. So that's part of it. So some of the challenges are then organizationally, and this is not a bad thing. I don't think people should be scared by this, but organizationally, if people grew up in the same organization and they knew one thing and skills didn't evolve, sometimes businesses step back and say, wait a minute, I got to do things a little differently, and I'm not sure if I have the right skill sets. And so then they have to think about how to do that differently. Now, I point that out to that problem because then that means they're inefficient in some certain places, but they need more skills to do things differently. So having a business necessarily understand how to unpack all that at the same time as serving the customer well made it harder for older companies necessarily to adapt if they didn't have that right kind of thinking. And then some of these newer startup companies that we've all talked about come along and they could just build it the right way. But then the older companies, that is, as we said, an opportunity for them to then say, well, wait a minute, I can do things differently by spinning something off potentially and doing it like that. So when all these inquiries are coming in, I completely agree with Tony. That's an opportunity. That's a customer that's reaching out to you. And if potentially they don't like the technology or they're not getting the answer they need quickly, they're going to keep calling, and then they're going to go online, and they're going to go on some of these places and put their comments out that everybody can see. So it's just, businesses need to adapt to be able to handle all that at once, and that takes a lot of leadership, takes the right workforce, takes the right operational processes, technology, and strategy.
In other words, it's really complicated.
But it's okay.
But it's doable. I guess that's
totally
what you're saying. So Frank, we are now, for this panel, we are really focused on digital innovations in the way customers engage and interact with businesses. But if you kind of step back from that a little bit, just based on what we have heard, and look at technological advances, it seems like many organizations have to be in this ongoing state of innovation because technology is moving so fast. How can an organization be prepared to sustain innovation the way they have to do now?
Right. Great question. So any advantage that should last for a bit has to be based on innovation. Innovation does what? It creates a temporary monopoly. If you think about a new product or a new process, if you're the only one in town, you have a temporary monopoly until others have copied it. For example, digital disruptions, if you look at Netflix, right? Their business model was DVDs through the mail. And first there was no late fees, and then they early on caught the wave of online streaming, right? So they solved the trade-off between the convenience and the cost factor, right? And but Netflix could only sustain this by continuously innovating and moving faster than others. As you now see Disney, for example, completely integrating and moving their content out of the Netflix platform to reach their customer themselves as the downstream pipe extracting so much value. So to gain advantage is difficult. To sustain it is even harder. Let me give you an example we're all familiar with. And many of us ask, how long can this go on? Apple is now a $1 trillion company. They had a 10-year run, basically started with the iPod in 2001, and then 2007 the iPhone really helped the combination with iTunes, the hardware and software ecosystem. But that advantage lasted now for a decade, and no advantage will last forever. 5 years from now, in Digital Disruption Panel 28, we'll ask the question, what happened to Apple? Right? Where did the Apple go? What happened to Apple? And so the notion is, if you think about Microsoft, digital disruption, Microsoft was slow to catch the wave to mobile devices and cloud computing as they were tied and married to the PC-based computing system, right? Even though they had all the technical capabilities. So what I'm trying to say is you have to continuously innovate to move forward. Netflix has as much pressure now, if not more, than they had 10 years ago. Because all the incumbents have clued in now and understand their business model and have a lot of things in their corner to hold back, including high-quality content, for example.
I would say from an experience perspective, that's absolutely true because you can deliver a differentiating experience until it's not differentiating anymore. In other words, over time, it becomes a basic expectation.
That's right.
When iPhones, iPads, all this came out, and we were interacting with the world in a new way.
Absolutely right.
It's a wondrous moment for those of us who grew up with black and white TVs and other things with wire hangers for antennas. My 2-year-old daughter, I recall, years ago, walking up to the television because she no longer was interested in the program that was on, and touching the screen and looking to swipe it.
Yeah.
Her basic expectation
That's right.
was she was in charge of the experience.
It's a great point. If I may quickly add, 5 years ago, we were happy to pay a premium for Zappos because we can order and send things back as we pleased. No questions asked. Today, we expect every online retailer to work like Zappos. And if they don't, then we feel there's something wrong in the interface.
That's right.
Well, if they don't, we don't go to them anymore. I think that's the challenge for a lot of businesses. So
You don't go and you're happy to pay a premium. I mean, with Zappos, you're not going to get the lowest price, but for us, time is more valuable.
exactly. So my third question, we heard about how we need to use technology. We can use technology and innovate to sort of allow the customers to engage and interact with businesses in an easy, efficient way. It appears that most of the technological innovation for customer interaction with businesses has been focused on efficiency gains and has been focused on reducing cost, doing things faster. Is there a way, Tony, that we can think of ways to step back and redesign that interaction or engagement in a way that is, by using technology, that it's really a preferred kind of experience, not doing the same thing but faster and more efficiently, but even better and faster and efficiently?
Yeah, I think in the service environment in particular, early days of introducing digital channels, most businesses saw that as a lower cost channel. Their strategy to address the cost side of the equation was to, and they use these terms, to push customers into the lower cost channel,
Yes.
to make it harder to find the higher cost channels.
Hide the customer telephone
Exactly
line,
right.
so they couldn't
And
call in. They had to be on the web, right?
Unfortunately, many of them, they had to learn the hard way that caused customer dissatisfaction and defection, and then they had to spend more marketing dollars to go find new customers to replace them. The way that they've come around is to use the digital experiences to design them in such a way that they're in fact a superior experience.
Right.
And it becomes a pull,
Right.
and it becomes a choice. And you've got to provide customers with choice of access, choice of convenience, however they want to interact with you, and make it a superior experience. And they'll go, and then you will benefit. That's the value exchange.
Like mobile banking, for example. Mobile banking, right? Check deposit and all the mobile banking we do now.
Exactly
Rather,
right.
yeah.
The bank benefits every time that I take a picture of a check and
right.
deposit it, but I benefit as well because not only do I get to do that, but my bank adds the cha-ching sound at the end. That feels pretty darn good. Feels great.
Very good.
Someone designed that into the experience, by the way.
That's right.
Really smart.
That's right. So, Janine, again, looking across various industries, various clients that you have, could you give us examples of this? The example we heard about the bank is a great one, but other examples possibly that they have sort of innovated in design and creation of that experience that is superior to.
Sure.
Yeah.
And absolutely. And I want to answer that other point too about the question on, is it about cost efficiency? Maybe it's just because I'm an optimist. I don't think it is anymore about cost efficiency. I agree completely. I was around in the olden days of direct mail when, we're going to take them out of mail and we're going to email them, and then it didn't work, so, all that. But anyway, it's not about cost efficiency. And some of the technology today is not inexpensive by any means. And so sometimes businesses will be out there spending all this money on technology and not know how to use it. But how it creates a better experience is another angle to look at this. It's in the area of relevance and giving you the right information at the right time to help you make an informed decision. Now again, I'm a marketer, so I'm always trying to think, how does a business make money? What are they selling? How am I going to get a customer at the right moment at the right time? So it's about, so think when you go online and people just search for something. I'm going to go to Phoenix, Arizona. Okay. The very next time, what happens? You see an ad for something from Phoenix, Arizona. People got used to that. That might have creeped me out the first time I saw that. And then I'm like, all right, I can deal with that. I know there's cookies. I know they're tracking me. I'm good with that. But then they start sending me emails. I'm like, no, I'm not good with that. That means you're linking my data here to an email. So customers push back on that. And then they'll start to opt out. And then now they hear the whole thing, oh, are they listening to me? And they can then send an ad to me. So my point in that is they're not doing that to save money. They're doing that to try to reach a customer with a relevant message so that you will buy something. Okay? That's an example of that. And the customers will tell you if that's okay or not. And they will start to put up boundaries and say, all right, I'm okay with that because I did search for that. And okay, that's fine. But then, so what really has to happen is in figuring out how to use technology to get somebody to communicate with them so that you reach the right customer and you avoid waste and just the olden days of throwing ads on television and hoping somebody sees them, putting up billboards. That still exists and is still an important channel. But again, brand is more two-way now. Brand is an experience. So it's right message, right time, right response. And if I don't get that right response, I may have to change it.
Right.
So that's more of like a retail experience or travel hospitality example, but I think it kind of paints a little bit of what the power of technology can do.
I would love to chime in to Tony's and Janine's comments about the customer experience. You think a bit about Tony's industry, Cox Automotive, B2B, and Janine mentioned that a lot of companies have now a lot of data, well, let's call it big data, don't know what to do with it, right? So cutting edge research right now, what I've seen in strategy, for example, is machine learning used to analyze big data and not just analyze customer reviews. And it turns out that the stars you give and the content you write are actually two different metrics for evaluating a product. So the stars you give, the 4 or 5 stars, is an intuitive snap reaction, system 1. The review you write about a book you read or an experience you had is actually the system 2, where you have to think about it and put it qualitatively out. And these kind of data, for example, are now fed back into R&D investments. What features are valued in the hedonic pricing for a car? Where should I put my money? And this is all these opportunities that were there before. Or if you think about one of my favorite examples here is Tesla. Tesla is, it's a manufacturing company, but it also creates a big data on autonomous driving, an ecosystem of sustainable transportation, because the more Teslas are on the road, the better the autonomous driving is. The more data points they have, the better the markings on the street. It's these network effects that are driving these digital disruptions that then others like Mercedes and BMW have to say, what are we going to do about this? We have to buy here another mapping system. We have to come up with some kind of competitive weapon. If we wait too long, they will have a network effect built like we see with Google Search that Dina Lavi mentioned in the opening today.
Yep. So, Frank, you started to touch upon this, but how can changes in strategy or innovations in strategy lead to a better customer experience? So you started to talk about business models and innovation in business models, which is an important component of strategy.
I think the first counterintuitive hypothesis I want to make is that strategy has become more important and not less important. Mm-hmm. So you have to know what you are about as a business and what your position is, and how you're going to use the digital innovations to drive this. And the envelope is going to be pushed. What's acceptable today is not acceptable tomorrow. So it's constantly moving. So it's a very dynamic process. And it's also very tricky, right? So we often talk about listening to the customers, but BlackBerry listened to the customers. Their customers were businesses and governments, and they said, yeah, we love your device, we love the encrypted software. But the consumers took their own iPhones to work, and in 2007, none of us cared really about security. Yeah, we heard about it, but we didn't know what the threat was. And now we can't look at a news channel anymore without hearing about security, whether it's elections, your personal data, your finances, whatever. And so they listened to the customer and they continued with what was valued, and lo and behold, they didn't have this. So you see these emergent strategies that come from the marketplace that you have to kind of be aware of. You have to have a system in place to capture those and to react up on this. Quickly, so a good strategy is a diagnosis of the competitive challenge. So if you think about Microsoft failed to diagnose the threat of mobile computing. A mission statement is not a strategy. It's maybe wishful thinking. And once you have to diagnose cold-blooded the competitive threat. What's the threat of Netflix to Disney? Once you have that threat identified, you have to have a guiding policy to implement it. And having a mission statement, we are the best customer service company, is not a mission, not a strategy. It may be wishful thinking. So that's the way I like to think about this.
That's really important. And I think the challenge, just reflecting on what you have mentioned, all of you, is this idea that competition is so fierce and it's coming from non-traditional sources. Like if, in the past, if you were in an auto manufacturer, well, you knew who your competitors were, you know, if you were a Ford or a GM. But now a software company comes in and becomes your competitor. So I think this issue around defining who your competitor is and your competitive channel is just really, really significant. Hard to anticipate. So, Tony, we talked about different ways that innovation in customer services and engagement is important. You started talking a little bit about this. What do we do with upskilling, and Janine, your point, for customer-facing employees? How do we keep them updated and change their skill to be able to quickly adapt and adopt these new technologies and new ways of interacting with customers? How do you go about doing that at Cox Automotive, for example?
So at Cox Auto, we believe that companies who are good at delivering customer experiences focus on customers and customer needs. Companies who are great at delivering customer experiences focus also on their people. And they focus on understanding what's in the way of their people delivering incredible experiences. And they remove those barriers, technology enabled and otherwise. And that can mean that you are deflecting interactions and having service happen within the systems, or it can mean that you are serving up the appropriate content because you know the system tells you who's calling, why they're most likely calling, and here's probably what they're asking about, and here's what to say. Mm-hmm. You have a shorter interaction, you have quicker time to resolution, you make your person answering the phone, for example, look like a rock star, you win. The customer wins and your people win. And when you do that, it impacts morale, it impacts engagement, it impacts culture, and there's a lot of additional sort of halo effect in terms of value creation when you do that. And that's how we approach it. Is we focus on our people and we focus on what it's going to take to equip them to be, as we say, unstoppable.
Janine, is there anything else you want to add to that in terms of what you have seen in terms of some other companies that are really good at dealing with their people, customer-facing people in particular, to enable them, give them the tools and training needed to do their job better?
Yeah, no, Tony said it very, very well. It's hugely important. In some cases, we'll work with some older, call them quick serve restaurants, for example, or places like that where they have a franchise model. It's a little more challenging there sometimes because they're not exactly employees, but yet these franchises need information. So when we helped this particular company, we had to go out and help them with all of the technology to be able to communicate with them. As we rebuilt some, say, a loyalty program or things like that for their end customers, we couldn't roll out any of that until we were sure that the training was there. Because certainly employees, franchises, they can certainly be upskilled in certain things, but it does start with the company at hand being able to help train them with what they need to know at the right time. That's like a basic thing. And then there's other things when the world changes and when jobs change, it happens quickly, but it also happens slower than you think, because you start to realize. Today I was in the airport, and everything in Philadelphia airport is now, it used to be this old dumpy airport, and they're really trying to change it and make it real modern and hip, and I think they took it a little too far, because it's like there's kiosks, there's just everywhere, and everything is self-checkout, everything, and you've got to find the place to swipe your credit card, people are a little freaked out by this. And I looked around, and there's all these people walking around helping people use the machines.
Right.
And I was like, so the people that used to stand behind the counter and grumble at you and
Yeah.
take forever to check your water when you got to run for your flight are now walking around. They got little badges on. How can I help you? How can I help you, swipe your card through? And I started, as I was coming here, to think, wow, like that is how they're trying to turn this airport around, and they potentially help these people go from a model where they sat behind the desk to now they have to walk around and understand how to use this technology. And it looked like there were just as many people there, if not more, employees than there used to be. So I think that's a way that technology does help, and whoever runs the Philadelphia airport is figuring out how to use the employees to do.
We call that, free-range customer service.
Okay, is that what that is? I was impressed.
And perhaps an objective
I
there
hope they
could
don't get rid of all of them, because they did a really good job.
And perhaps the a motivation would be that after a while the customer learns to really do it himself or herself, so we don't
We're
have
pretty
to have
slow
that
up
many.
there in Philly. I don't know. It might take a while.
Yeah, so it always takes longer than what you anticipate.
It does,
Isn't that
yes,
interesting?
yes.
So Frank, we heard about the need for upskilling and training the customer-facing employees in these new ways. What other competencies and resources do you think organizations need to be able to make the change and the adjustment?
Right, it's a great point, Dia Lavi. And quickly comment on your earlier point on the industry analysis you mentioned. So what we see is this major convergence taking place. So if I were to ask you tonight, what industry is Amazon in, right? I mean, it started from an online retailer for books and DVDs. So I was fortunate. I was at the University of Washington when it started in '95, and turned out the books were just a pilot project for online retailing as a commodity, and then from there we go. And now AWS is the most profitable division, right? So what business is Amazon in now, forwardly integrated into Whole Foods, Amazon Go, and the complete experience? What industry is Alphabet or Google in, right? That's another good question. And so what I see happening in the digital disruption, if you think about it, it's the first industries, the industries that are least efficient get disrupted first. Uber, Lyft, or Grab in Asia, the ride-hailing experience, Airbnb. Yesterday, I bought a used car at CarMax. I was there in '94 when Austin Ligon, founder of CarMax, presented that concept. CarMax came out of Circuit City. Circuit City is now defunct and bankrupt, but they had a core competency, which is what's critical in Tony's industry, which is meeting supply and demand in space and time. In Circuit City sat down and said, what's our core competency? And they said, our core competency is big box retailing geographically across the entire United States. What can we do with this? They did a customer survey and said, what's the worst experience you've had? Number one was root canal. Number two, it's not a joke. It's not a joke. This is a true survey result. Number two is buying a used car. So the 90s, you bought the used car, you had to deal with people you usually don't. It's a very unpleasant experience. Price gouging, reservation price. They ask you what you do, just assess how much you can spend for a used car, and so forth. So CarMax now combines the digital side, which is I priced the car, I saw the car, I spec'd it out, I had it transported from Kennesaw. I spent all the time online. The transaction took 60 minutes from start to finish, or even less. So this is the way to think about this. This core competency came out of Circuit City. Circuit City is bankrupt. Lost out against Best Buy. Best Buy is now challenged by Amazon, right? So it means in the retail space, you have to provide an experience. What's great about the CarMax example is it combines brick and mortar in digital to provide an experience that you cannot just provide online or brick and mortar only. I live in Cumming, the suburbs. The hottest innovation there is these drive-through Walmart shopping experience where you order online, you go in the drive-through, they put your groceries in, you're on your way home. You don't even leave your car. And you don't have to spend time shopping, and you can order everything you need, milk, eggs, whatever, cereal, in a very competitive price point. So long story short, strategy about creating value, and you got to think how you're going to provide an experience that you can't be substituting for online easily. Yeah.
Very good. I have lots of other questions, but I would like to leave some time for the audience to ask questions from our panelists. But let me just very quickly, is there any question that you wished I had asked you but I didn't? Any one of you? Something that you really feel passionate about talking about?
Yeah, what time does the reception start?
Okay.
I
So
do
with that,
think
I'm sorry, go ahead,
There's
Tony.
two things that kind of came up along the way that to me are essential. One is there isn't a single business out there that didn't start by first thinking that there are people who need something that they're not getting, or they're not getting it in the way that they really want. The reason we're all in business is to deliver customer value.
That's right.
And we get value back out of that if we manage it the right way. That's essential no matter what we're doing. And the second is, as we're all, our business is shifting the volume to more and more digital volume. Some people fall into the trap of thinking as digital as something separate. And a saying, I can't remember where I saw it, but really struck with me and I want to share, is that there is no digital strategy.
Right.
There's only strategy in a digital world.
Right.
And the same goes for experience.
That's right.
And I think that those two things are essential to what we need to remember as we're going out and changing the world.
Yes.
Deliver value for customers, and don't pretend that digital is some magical other.
It has to be
just
a means to the end.
the environment is changing. Let's continue to figure out how to use the environment to deliver that essential value to customers.
Perfect. A great way of summarizing it. Let me now open it to the audience if there are any questions. Can you turn the lights back on? I don't know, so we can see people. Where's the question?
I got a question here.
Okay.
Right in the back. So thank you for your insights. I really appreciate this. I do have one that I hope hasn't been addressed, but if it has, please let me know. Who owns the customer experience? Is it a chief customer experience officer? Is it everybody and then nobody owns it? You know, I pose that to everyone because I think that's a very important role.
So I'll take a run at that because it's a great question. And I've seen the customer experience management capability sit in the CMO's office. I've seen it with an SVP of sales. I've seen it in operations. I've also even seen it led by a CIO as a means of getting the rest of those constituents to prioritize on behalf of customer value, which was, I think, genius on the CIO's part. But what I say is, in my role, I have responsibility for helping the company understand what customers value, where we have gaps in delivering against that, and guiding prioritization of operationalizing that. I can do none of that by myself. And so what I say is I don't own the customer experience, but I own the customer conversation. And that's really important because it takes everybody getting back to understanding that we're all here to deliver customer value. That's why we're here, and we all need to understand our particular role based on where we sit in contributing to that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is collaboration is key. It is such an exciting time to be in business. It really, really is. And I agree with everything Tony just said, and it can sit in any one of those places, or it could be a chief experience officer. But what is key as people go through their careers and in whatever business you're in is it has to be collaborative, or it will fail. The days of silos, this is my job, and I'm CIO doesn't like the CMO, like businesses will fail if that continues, which means it ultimately is with the CEO to make sure that that happens. And each of the kind of the heads have to be out there looking at that. It can't be just, I got to sell my product and I got to make my numbers. And if they're being measured on selling that product and making their numbers, then that negatively impacts the customer experience, then that is not what's right for the business. So you have to look at metrics, how people are measured, all that stuff has to change to be able to truly deliver on that.
I do believe there has to be a focal point of accountability and collaboration at its best in the form of orchestration amongst all those constituents. Because the opposite is, I've heard folks say this, that oh, we all own the customer experience. We're a very customer-focused company, and if everybody owns it, nobody really owns it. It's the, what do they call it, the tragedy of the commons.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right. Dr. Tony Kimani, class of 2014. This has to do with the patient experience. We just heard from the survey that a healthcare experience was the worst possible experience you could have. Maybe this is for Janine. Can you address perhaps the role of digital customer experience when it comes to healthcare and patients?
Yeah, I mean, so again, I think, and I'm not a healthcare expert by any means, but I think that might be because who ultimately owns it, right? Like, so go back to businesses, someone's trying to make money somewhere. It's terrible. It's people's healthcare. I get it. But if you look at the hospitals or the doctors or whatever, they will probably tell you they do as much as they can, even with that technology. But ultimately, somebody's getting paid somehow to do things an old way. So until that entire model is looked at in terms of third-party providers, you know, anybody that touches healthcare. So I can tell you, though, in working with a lot of like life sciences companies and healthcare providers, they all have the intentions of wanting to do the right thing, but there is so much infrastructure and they have to work together to do this that it's going to be challenging. So for example, you can try with physicians to break down the amount of time they have to spend, you know, looking things up, and you know, you bring them in their iPads and they're able to look things up and find patient history. So I think that part's getting better. Patients have better access to their data as well. It's just the whole experience, linking that to paying the provider and all those things, it kind of breaks down there. And so, you know, that's going to be a bigger thing. Everyone wants to improve the healthcare experience. It's just who's going to be the one that ultimately put it together.
So in addition, but I think you would agree, the industry is probably also ripe for somewhat of a disruption, right? If you think about the power of information held by consumers, we now have a lot of information to buy cars as commodities, but with companies like 23andMe, for example, DNA testing, every consumer can get a complete read of 200 plus disease indicators. And now you can really get yourself smart about your individual health profile, and you will know much more about your personal health than your physician will know, as she has to see 48 patients a day. So that will be a lot of push for value creation from the consumer side also.
Yeah, I think if the healthcare system was old school, a town doctor, and it was singular, that person caring for the community, you'd see change happen rapidly. But there are too many players in there who are beholden to the way they're organized, which dictates how they go about it. And until they address how they're organized and get back to the essential delivery of value, it'll be really hard for that to change.
Unless Amazon decides to seriously get into that space.
Well, there you go.
It does now with the health insurance, right? I mean,
Right, and
so
they may be eyeing it, who knows?
that's right.
Okay.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is when you look at the value exchange, you're really looking at a situation where the total perceived value that you give up is less than the total perceived value of what you're getting. And it doesn't make any difference where you are in healthcare. On the total perceived value of what you're getting is life, which is priceless. So the number goes way up, and therefore people are willing to pay more
right.
for healthcare than they probably should. But it's also true that that formula works both sides, because the seller has to feel like the total value of what they're giving up is less than what they're getting as well. And it's really that value exchange, the perceived value, not the real value, because we don't know the real value. It's always the perceived value that plays in there. And that total perceived value includes that experience that you go through on the entire sales process, from the customer experience and also from the sales experience. And putting those two things together, it really, you start to see a lot of things, why things happen and why people do things and why people are not catching on to some of the things they're not including in that total perceived cost.
Good comment.
I agree.
Yeah.
Right here.
George Swamitt, EMBA class of 2019. You brought this up, which is right now we have a big wealth of data, big data, 23andMe. You have your SARS, your reactive, your reactive insights, and you have your comments, which is your tier 2. How do you, from an analytics standpoint, figure out what to go after and invest your resources in from a metric standpoint?
What to go after from what perspective? I'm
What
sorry.
do you, from an analytics standpoint, how do you
That's
figure
right.
out what to measure?
That's right.
You can't measure everything, but how do you figure out what your core
Right.
metrics are?
Yeah, we get a wealth of information, a dearth of attention, right? And how to make sense of it, right? So that's a big challenge, how to make sense of all the data we know generating.
Yeah, to me that is really shows the importance of your strategy and what it is that you're really going after, and how do you create value and how do you measure that value that you're creating. Because otherwise you're absolutely right, we are just inundated in oceans of data. And that's why strategy is even more important in this time and age, because, and you know, I get this all the time, oh, analytics, and I'm thinking, great. But what is the question for which analytics provides you the answer, right? So asking the right question, measuring the right parameters is even more important than ever, because, you know, if you measure the wrong things, you come up with the wrong answer.
Yeah.
So,
And I like to say there's value in small data. In other words, the data set is massive. Big data doesn't get you value until you've aligned it to a particular use case, a set of hypotheses, a set of crisp questions.
Right.
You make big data small data, and you incrementally drive value. You learn from those experiences, and then you create a backlog of those use cases, and pretty soon you get into medium data, and you're actually delivering value.
And to figure that out, there's usually 4 different people sitting around trying to figure that out. There's someone with a big creative idea. There's someone that understands strategy at a lower level, like little strategy, like this is what I'm trying to sell, this is what I'm trying to achieve. There's someone that understands the data, and there's someone that knows how to use the tool. And those are 4 different people sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes if you just have a bunch of analysts digging, they don't know what to look for because they know how to use that, and that's great. But somebody else over here with this big idea doesn't even know that data exists. So that gets back to it takes a lot of people in a room sometimes to figure that question out.
It's a great question. We have projects right now going on where banking, investment banking, come to us and say, we have all this data, what are we going to do with it?
right.
How do we think about this? And so this is a great question. I think we just hit the tip of the iceberg right now to really help us. So the fact is that we now have much better data than we had before with just the survey data and perceptions that the other colleague earlier mentioned, which can be misleading to some extent.
Yeah.
I'm DJ, one of Scheller faculty. So Scheller's mission is to produce principled business leaders in the intersection of business and technology. I have a question for the panel is, what skills will not be disrupted in the next 20 years?
Leadership. That's just my easy answer.
That's a good answer, but if you just drive that into specifics, my answer would be, of course, leadership, but a lot of what we think about as higher order thinking capabilities, complex problem solving, formulating hypotheses, being creative, and of course, some of the soft skills in terms of conflict management, complex negotiations. The smarter the machines get and the more data we have, the smarter human beings we need to be able to harness all this and be able to really address the complex problems. That's why this teaming people and machines to address more complex problems is going to be the real key. Companies who figure out how to do this is going to be the ones that are going to pull ahead.
If I may add 30 seconds to this insightful comment. So the way I say AI play out next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, if you think about any routine job, AI is going to be substitute. If you think about any cognitive job, AI is going to be a complement, meaning you as a cognitive worker with AI are going to be stronger than cognitive or AI alone. If your work is routine only, I will be worried about 20 years from now whether your job is there or whether that particular job is there. So think about the cognitive value creation as a complement to AI as a skill that cannot be substituted away.
Okay. One last question. We are already past 7, so one last question, please. Yeah. Go ahead.
Good. I was standing up earlier and then I froze. To follow Dr. Rothamel's question on is maybe for Janine, the specific skill sets that you look for in your practice. Something that is both currently relevant, but also forecasted to grow in necessity for success in this area.
Sure. I'm a little slanted in my view of that because of, again, what I run in marketing. But what has not changed and a lot of it has to do with the demand of skills we didn't have. So Accenture's had a lot of technology skills for a long time, but that's not changing. So technology skills around data, marketing-related data, customer data, skills on how to use platforms, the media space, understanding kind of the platform data that we've all talked about related to Google and things like that. Like I have a 22-year-old and 23-year-old child. I'm like, go to school for that. Like understand that kind of marketing, analytics, and data. That is not changing. That is not going away. Those kinds of skills. Anything related to strategy is huge. We can't hire people fast enough that understand marketing and business strategy. I put those things together because a true marketer will start by asking, how do you make money? What am I trying to sell? What am I trying to do? And then what is the customer going to react to? Those things are not changing, nor is creativity. That's right. So, and I know this is business and technology together, but I mean, technology is not going anywhere, and I'm not a technologist, so I can't answer the specific kinds of technology, but those things are still out there. We see less need for people that are just a little more operational. I'm not saying project management's not important, it totally is, but project management with strategy, more valuable. Right. Do you have, I know we're running over, but I don't know if anybody else wanted to add to that.
I think that was well put. So let's thank our great panelists. This concludes our program for tonight, and now I invite you to please join us for a light reception in the atrium. And thank you for being here.